This is Voice of the Global South, your weekly guide to everything that's happening in Latin America and the Caribbean, Africa, Asia, and Oceania. On the show this week, Israel kills Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon's capital Beirut. Will it lead to an all-out regional war? And can this man turn Sri Lanka's fortunes around? We tell you all about Anurag Kumara Dissanayake, the man and his politics. All that and much, much more coming up on Voice of the Global South. Hassan Nasrallah is dead. The Israel Defense Forces posted a somewhat cryptic message on X on Saturday. It read that Hassan Nasrallah will no longer be able to terrorize the world. That message was followed within minutes by another more direct and unambiguous one from Lieutenant Colonel Nadav Shoshani, the international spokesperson of the IDF. It left no one in doubt. The leader of the Lebanon-based Hezbollah was killed in his lair in an Israeli strike on the group's headquarters in Beirut on Friday. It was Israel's biggest success since the start of an operation codenamed Northern Arrows. Nasrallah's killing raises many questions though. What are its implications for West Asia and the world at large? How will Hezbollah respond? Will the 2006 Lebanon-Israel war play out all over again? Will Iran get involved? Will this bold move by Israel force Hezbollah to pull back from the border with Israel? And most importantly, will this daring operation pave the way for Israelis' return to their homes near the border with Lebanon? Now, what is unfolding in West Asia will impact you sooner than later. Make no mistake. I'll come to that if time permits. But first, let me take a moment or two to put all of this in its proper context for you. Now, Tehran is an Israeli TV series that premiered in Apple TV Plus in the year 2020. In it, an Iranian general receives a call on his mobile phone. At the other end of the line is an undercover Israeli spy. The spy detonates the phone the moment the Iranian general answers the call. Further is another Israeli TV drama on Netflix. In one of its episodes, a mobile phone bomb detonates when an enemy answers a call from who else but an Israeli spy, of course. The final episode of the second season of Tehran was aired on 17th June 2022. Word is that the third season of Tehran has been delayed. But the wait for the fifth season of Further might soon be over. Further's creator, Avi Issacharoff, is writing the next season of the series these days. Issacharoff posted a message on X on 17th September, barely 4 hours after thousands of pagers exploded simultaneously in a synchronized manner in Lebanon. Nothing comes close to reality, he wrote. And he's right. What the world saw unfold in Lebanon and Syria on that particular day was nothing short of spectacular and audacious. It could have been straight out of a John le Carre book or a James Bond film. More electronic devices exploded the next day, that is 18th September. Everything from smartphones and laptops to biometric devices and walkie-talkies blew up. More than 30 people were killed and 3,000 wounded. many with serious injuries. A majority of them were Hezbollah cadres. The attack put 1,500 of its fighters out of commission because of their injuries. Many were blinded or had their hands blown off. There were civilians among the dead too, including an 8-year-old girl, an 11-year-old boy, and 4 health workers. Now, who was behind these attacks? Well, one can only make an informed guess. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied responsibility for the attack. But Hezbollah squarely blames Israel for it, and perhaps with good reason. In 1996, Israel used the same method, a booby-trapped mobile phone, to kill Hamas's Yahya Ayyash. Now, the pages exploded hours after Israel announced the expansion of its Gaza war goals. A new goal is to enable the return of thousands of Israelis to their homes in areas bordering Lebanon. Now, these are people who were evacuated from areas that were in range of Hezbollah units. Between 60 to 70,000 Israelis have been evacuated from northern Israel in the past year. This after nearly daily exchanges of fire by Hezbollah following the 7th October 2023 attacks by Hamas. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his government will ensure that these people return to their homes. Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says a new phase in the Gaza war has started. Its center of gravity is moving northward towards Israel's border with Lebanon. Israel's army chief Herzi Halevi in turn says his forces are determined to act. But Hezbollah links its stopping of rocket attacks on Israel to a Gaza ceasefire. It moved men and materiel close to the border with Israel after the Hamas attacks. It redeployed its fighters to frontline areas in southern Lebanon, and it has been firing rockets and missiles ever since. Now, at the heart of the issue is the Litani River. The Litani originates and flows entirely within the borders of Lebanon. It rises in the Bekaa Valley west of Baalbek, and it empties into the Mediterranean Sea north of Tyre. At 140 kilometers, the Litani is the longest river in Lebanon. The river is about 30 kilometers from Lebanon's border with Israel. Israel wants to push the Hezbollah as far north of the river. It wants to clear the area of Hezbollah fighters and prevent their return so that northern Israel is out of range of the Hezbollah rockets. And Israel has good reasons for wanting that. Why? Because of the UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which was adopted in the year 2006. It created a buffer zone between the UN-drawn blue line in southern Lebanon and the Litani River. Now, the blue line is the 120-kilometer line of withdrawal. It was identified in the year 2000 by the United Nations in cooperation with Lebanese and Israeli officials for the purpose of confirming the withdrawal of Israel's military from Lebanese territory. The blue line does not constitute the official border between Lebanon and Israel. The resolution says this area between the blue line and the Litani River must be free of any armed personnel, assets and weapons other than those of Lebanon's military and the United Nations interim force in Lebanon. Now, as of 2nd September 2024, UNIFIL consists of 10,058 peacekeepers from 50 troop contributing countries. Now, this might interest our viewers in India. UNIFIL has 903 Indian peacekeepers. India is the third largest contributor of troops to UNIFIL after Indonesia and Italy. A quick word about UNIFIL's history as well. The first UNIFIL troops arrived in the area in March 1978. After the 2006 war between Hezbollah and Israel, the UN Security Council enhanced UNIFIL's mandate. UNIFIL is deployed in southern Lebanon. Its area of operations is defined by the Litani River in the north and the Blue Line in the south. And any unauthorized crossing of the Blue Line by land or by air from any side constitutes a violation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701. Kirby Michael is an analyst at Tel Aviv University's Institute for National Security Studies. He says the idea that Israel cannot realize its sovereignty over the northern part of the country is something that cannot be tolerated. The residents of the northern Israeli city of Nahariya air similar sentiments. Some of them want Israel to deal with Hezbollah once and for all. Israel's Foreign Minister Israel Katz is categorical. He says there will be no ceasefire in the north. Now, Andreas Krieg is with the King's College London. He sounds a note of caution. He says completely neutralizing Hezbollah might not be easy. Take a listen.
The idea for the IDF is to then just grab territory and holding it in southern Lebanon, moving or pushing Hezbollah physically up to the Litani River. This is at least something that Israel might be temporarily be able to achieve, but is a situation that the IDF will not be able to maintain for long. So we'll have to eventually withdraw again. And then obviously Hezbollah can move back in. So it's an operation at large cost that at very best would probably achieve operational objectives, military objectives, but will be far from achieving any strategic objectives because Hezbollah will not be unseated in Lebanon and Hezbollah will not be destroyed.
Now, the US, France and the allies have all called for a 21-day ceasefire across the Israel-Lebanon border. They've expressed support for a ceasefire in Gaza as well after holding the talks among themselves earlier this week. Now, US President Joe Biden says an all-out war is possible, but he remains hopeful of a settlement. The heaviest fighting in nearly 2 decades between Israel and Hezbollah, coupled with the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, raise fears of a new, wider conflict. Now, Hezbollah's main supporter and weapon supplier is Iran. The group is the most powerful faction in Tehran's so-called axis of resistance. Hezbollah has faced off against Israel since the Shiite Muslim movement was created by Iran. It was founded in 1982 to counter Israel's invasion of Lebanon. The group has since evolved into Iran's most powerful proxy in West Asia. A report for the US legislature says Hezbollah has 40 to 50,000 fighters. The Hezbollah claims, on the other hand, it has 100,000 fighters. It has been bringing rockets into Lebanon at a fast pace, anticipating a drawn-out conflict. So by all accounts, Hezbollah is the most formidable enemy Israel has faced on the battlefield, not because of numbers and technology, but in terms of sheer resilience. Now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has instructed his army to fight on. Hardliners in his government say Israel should reject any truce and keep hitting Hezbollah where it hurts them. Netanyahu's office released a photograph of him inside his office at the UN headquarters in New York City while using a landline telephone to approve the strike targeting Nasrallah. Before long, Israeli jets had conducted several heavy airstrikes on the headquarters of Hezbollah. Now, Hassan Nasrallah was 64 years old. He became the Secretary General of Hezbollah in 1992 when he was only in his 30s. He wore the black turban of a Sayyid or a descendant of Prophet Muhammad. Nasrallah grew up in Beirut's impoverished Karantina district. His family hailed from Bazourieh, a village in Lebanon's predominantly Shiite south, which today forms Hezbollah's political heartland. Nasrallah was part of a generation of young Lebanese Shiites whose political outlook was shaped by Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution. So the question is, who will get to return home first? Hostages from Gaza or Israelis who fled the areas bordering Lebanon? Now, Netanyahu says Israel has no choice and every right to enable its citizens to return to their homes. For his part, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says his military has neither forgotten the goals in Gaza nor the hostages in the Gaza enclave. Gallant says that now it is time to ensure that those displaced from the north return to their homes. But US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has his doubts. He fears that an escalation will only make it harder for Israeli civilians to return home. So what will Israel do? Will it invade Lebanon? Will Hezbollah and Iran sit idly by? Watch this space. Right, time for a very short break. Keep watching DD India. Don't go anywhere.
Is foreign interference becoming the biggest threat to democracy worldwide?
Human mind is being hacked. How it is being hacked is by sowing those seeds of doubt in the leadership.
This falls in the domain of grey zone warfare, where even before the information age, there always was foreign interference in elections.
It is Cold War 2.0, force multiplied with digital technology, and then reaching out to each and every individual voter.
Welcome back. You're watching Voice of the Global South. And now to our next report, which is on Sri Lanka. It is more than 2 years since the Aragalaya protest shook Sri Lanka to the core. Aragalaya means struggle in the Sinhala language. The imagery of people storming the presidential palace and hoisting the Sri Lankan national flag amid slogans of Gota, go home. Now, Gota is a nickname of the then president Gotabaya Rajapaksa. He fled the country in the wake of the Aragalaya protests and resigned afterwards. That imagery is still fresh in the minds of many in this island nation of 23 million people. Cut to 2024. The Aragalaya sweeps a bearded 55-year-old son of a labourer into power. Meet Anura Kumara Disanayake, self-avowed Marxist, leader of the Janata Vimukthi Peramuna Party or the People's Liberation Front, and the Jatika Jana Balavegaya, an alliance of political parties and trade unions. Disanayake was born on 24 November 1968. AKD, as he is popularly known, has humble origins. Studied at a government-funded school, got a degree in physics, worked as a tuition teacher, sold toffee and cigarettes on trains, became a student leader, counts Che Guevara among his heroes. Elected to the JVP Central Committee in 1997, became a lawmaker in 2000, served as Agriculture Minister between 2004 and 2005 in a coalition government headed by President Chandrika Kumaratunga. He became the leader of JVP in 2014 and ran for president in 2019 when he finished third with only 3% of the votes. Now, Disanayake's party, the JVP, was formed in 1965. It led two rebellions in 1971 and 1987. In fact, he was a student leader at the time of the second armed insurrection. This was around the time of the 1987 India-Sri Lanka Peace Accord. The two revolts left more than 80,000 people dead. But the JVP has since claimed to have renounced violence. The party entered democratic politics in 1994. Disanayake himself apologized for the violence unleashed by his party. The JVP was a peripheral player in Sri Lanka's politics for the longest time. It won only 4% of the votes in the 2020 parliamentary election. The party has only 3 lawmakers in the 225-member legislature. But Disanayake's and the JVP's popularity soared in the wake of the Aragalaya protests. Now, there are many firsts here. It was the first presidential election since the 2022 economic crisis. Disanayake is Sri Lanka's first leftist president. He is the first president to win the lowest number of votes, just over 42%. That led to the counting of people's second preference votes. Consequently, it was the first time a second round of counting was held. Disanayake is also the first political leader who does not belong to the political elite or a political family or dynasty. Many see his win as a breath of fresh air in Sri Lankan politics, a fresh start, a new beginning after years of political and economic tumult. Someone who can restore public faith in politics. But Disanayake has sought to temper expectations from him. He says he does not have a magic solution to problems. He says, I'm not a magician. I am as common a citizen as any other Sri Lankan. I have strengths and limitations. There are things I know and things I don't. And my responsibility is to be part of a collective effort to end this crisis.
There is one dream our people see every new day the sun rises. That is tomorrow will be better than today. However, you and I have both learned for many years that this is just a dream. Opportunism, the greed for power, and authoritarianism have hindered our country's progress. But now we have our final opportunity, which cannot be missed. Let us unite to create a thriving and beautiful country that embraces diversity.
Now, Dissanayake retains the common touch. He has ordered the police to reopen 2 roads, the Sir Baron Jayatilake Mawatha and Janadipati Mawatha near the President's house, to the public. He's also increased the fertilizer subsidy for paddy farmers from $50 to $84 with effect from 1st October for the September 2024 to March 2025 period. And he has promised to cut taxes, fight corruption and reduce the cost of living. In a televised address on 25th September, Dissanayake spoke about his plans for resuming talks with the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, to advance Sri Lanka's $2.9 billion bailout program. If you remember, Sri Lanka had declared itself bankrupt in 2022. It suspended repayments on $83 billion in domestic and foreign loans. A severe shortfall of dollars spun the country's economy into a deep financial crisis. It led to a shortage of essential commodities such as food, medicines, fuel, and even cooking gas. Inflation soared to a high of 70% in September of 2022.
The economic crisis and what led to the people's movement are key indicators that people wanted a change. And that message was very much articulated in 2022 in wanting to see a change in political culture which kind of saw high corruption and nepotism. And that seems to have been captured in the messages and the manifestos that we saw in the NPP and the Anurukumara Dissanayake campaign slogans. So really it's kind of tapping into what people were feeling in 2022 and really capturing the people's imagination that change is possible with this new formation that is the NPP.
Now, Dissanayake softened some of his policies in the past few years. For instance, his NPP alliance now espouses a middle ground. He believes in an open economy and is not totally opposed to privatization. He has vowed to press ahead with the IMF rescue package but modify its terms in order to deliver tax cuts to his people. So in a nutshell, Dissanayake's priorities include 1. Renegotiate a bailout agreement with the IMF, and 2. Make austerity measures more bearable for the country's poor. Dissanayake faces a number of key challenges though. First and foremost, economy and growth. Dissanayake will have to ensure the economy returns to sustainable and inclusive growth. He will have to reassure local and international markets, and he has to attract investors as well. He also has to help a quarter of Sri Lanka's 23 million population climb out of poverty. Then there are the issues of IMF program and taxation. Dissanayake has to hold discussions with the IMF to reduce taxes and free up public revenue for tax relief and investment. But questions remain. Why is he tight-lipped about his stance on key issues concerning the ethnic Tamil population in the north and east? Does he support the implementation of the 13th Amendment to the Sri Lankan Constitution? The 13th Amendment flows from the India-Sri Lanka Peace Accord of 1987. Among other things, it calls for devolution of police and land powers to the Tamil minority. Next, what will his government's foreign policy be towards India? Or will he allow his predominantly Sinhala political base to get the better of him? And will he allow his ideological moorings to shore up ties with China? Now, India is Sri Lanka's biggest neighbor and China is its largest bilateral creditor. Both India and China are competing for influence in Sri Lanka. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi says he looks forward to working closely with Dissanayake. Dissanayake visited India in February and held talks with India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval as well. Dissanayake has sought to allay concerns about the JVP's historical anti-West and anti-India stance. He used his inauguration speech to reject power divisions in the world and pledged to work with all other countries for the benefit of his own.
Our country needs international support. We expect that whatever the divisions in the international community to deal with the countries, our country needs international support. We expect that whatever the division in the international community to deal with countries, we get the best deal. We are not a state that needs to be isolated in the world. We are a nation that must go forward hand in hand with the international community. We will not hesitate to take decisions to achieve this.
Now, analysts say that Sri Lanka and Dissanayake can ignore India only at their own peril. The logic of interdependence will ensure that the ties do not go off kilter. India was quick to bail Sri Lanka out with billions of dollars in assistance. New Delhi's neighborhood first policy ensures that India is the first responder during crises. India says it does not expect all its neighbors to necessarily adhere to what India considers as being better for them. In the real world, countries make their own choices and they find a way to adjust and work together. Now, Dissanayake has called a snap parliamentary election on 14 November. He hopes to ride the wave of approval and consolidate power in parliament because the lack of numbers in parliament has meant that Dissanayake has not been able to name a proper cabinet. Why do I say that? Because he has named Professor Harini Amarasuri as Prime Minister and given her 5 portfolios. Vijita Herath was given charge of 6 ministries, including Foreign Affairs. And Dissanayake has kept key ministries such as Finance, Defence and Energy for himself. Now, if the snap parliamentary election throws up a verdict similar to the presidential poll, then Sri Lanka will have a cohabitation government with a president and prime minister from 2 different parties. Dissanayake needs a minimum of 113 seats to gain control of the parliament, for which he will have to enlist the support of the minorities, including Tamils. The Tamils have not warmed up to him so far. Now, President Dissanayake has his task cut out for him. Can he deliver? Will he be able to balance ideological compulsions, domestic reforms and geopolitical pulls and pressures? We'll know in the months ahead. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Voice of the Global South. But news continues here on DD India. You can get all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.